What's up, big ballers, shot callers? This is Big Ken here. Welcome from the Grid to the Rim Sports Talk Show. I'm joined by my co-host Monty Brown, and we have a special guest today, Brad Gray from out. You're living in Alabama, right, Brad?
South Carolina,
South
actually.
Carolina. For some reason, I thought it was Alabama.
Oh, so like, man, Brad, it's been a minute. How you doing, man?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Well, Brad, first, welcome to the show. You're another good friend. I know you're I'm a big Alabama fan. I'm a Michigan fan, so we'll have a lot to talk about today. But
Hey, let's tell you what. Let me just not say a word, and I'll just let you guys go at it. How's that?
Monty's going to be the mediator, man. He's the peacemaker. But real quick before we get started on the college football playoffs and what the selection committee did, just want to talk about real quick how the three of us know each other. Me and Monty have been doing the show for several months. We opened up with March Madness with myself, Monty, his nephew Dwayne, and my Navy friend Jack. We started with March Madness. That's how we started this show, and it continued until now. But the three of us, myself, Monty, and Brad, we all went to Parkland High School in El Paso, Texas, and Brad graduated with me in '92, if I remember correctly, and Monty a little bit older than us, but Brad and Monty played football together at Parkland High School, and I played basketball, so that's like our connection with the three of us is we're all Parkland High School graduates, alumni, Matadors, whatever you want to call it. So the funny thing is Parkland's gotten a lot better in sports since we left. When we were there, we were the little runt school, but now Parkland is like going to playoff games in football and basketball, something that never happened when we were there back in the '90s, but it's happening now. So a lot has changed with Parkland High School.
I like to say the class of '91 was the one that started it because that was the first winning season that the football team had in like 20 years. So
yeah,
we went 5-4
that year.
That is right. But there was one thing, and not to take away from the football team, because you guys played great, and I went to all your games in '91 and '92. But didn't you guys play like in a different level didn't you play in a lower 5A level than we did in basketball? Didn't they like lower like the games you played? Not lower, but you went to like a different independent.
Yeah, the football team went independent. Yeah, so we played Hobbs and Las Cruces Oñate, which are powerhouses. They're 5A powerhouses in New Mexico. And then we also still played some of the 5A schools from El Paso. And then we also played a couple of 4A schools too, like Canutillo and
I remember that.
And some of them.
Yeah, that rings a bell. It's not a take away from anything you guys did because you guys were great. You guys had 2 winning seasons in a row. And in basketball, we just couldn't get it quite together after Curtis Hagens left, the guy that went to play D2 ball in Missouri. But a lot of it was because of me, because I had bad grades. I never played because I was always off the team. So, and I didn't give my best effort back then. That's one thing I do feel guilty about is obviously it's kind of silly because we graduated from high school 30 years ago, but I always tell Monty I wish I can go back and kind of give it my best effort because I don't think I did. And I'm a big, believer in that, especially with me and you doing Army and Navy, doing a full career, retiring, I kind of learned how to give it my best and give it my all, but back then I just didn't quite have that kind of drive, and I was just all messed up, and I was just a typical kid. It's funny how you learn things being 49 years old versus being 17, 18 years old back then. I was just confused. So I wish I could do it all over again, but I was proud of my son and daughter because my son, especially in soccer, he showed out, he showcased his talent. And that's the one thing I told him is I never really showcased what I could have done, but it is what it is. So life learning lessons, man. But I do feel guilty because I feel like, man, I didn't give it my best, and I kind of feel bad, but oh well, it's 30 years ago. I still talk a lot with the guys though. So
but the good thing about it, man, is, and it's a bunch of us missing our whole circle. Turned out well. We all did well, or doing well at least. So that's one thing I'm proud to say about all of us, man.
I agree. Yeah, all the Parkland guys are doing great, and we keep up with a lot of them on Facebook, man. So I'm just kind of glad we got this little reunion today. But let's get into college football playoffs, man, or the selections. Oh, wow! Number 1, Michigan. Number 2, UW. Number 3, Texas. Number 4, Brad's Alabama Crimson Tide.
You say that with such conviction.
I hope, well, I know what I think, but I know the history of Michigan is not good, but I'll turn it over to you guys. Well, Monty, what do you think about 1 through 4? Do you got any issues with 1 through 4? Do you agree with it, or you okay? What about teams being left out? Do you think there's something with Florida State not being in there, Georgia? What's your take on all that stuff?
I'm okay with it. I was way off on our what we talked about the other day. I thought no matter what would happen with Alabama and Georgia, Brad, that Georgia would stay in there. But watching that game, man, your Crimson Tide dominated. But like you mentioned on Facebook, it's the eye test, and they showed up. They really showed up. So yeah, they deserve to be in there. The reason why I think Florida State didn't get in, because with that undefeated record, I think the MCAA, they don't want a repeat of the championship. They don't want to see another 65-7.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, I'm gonna tell you right now, when Washington gets into that first round, they're gonna see exactly that.
I don't think so, man.
This is a rematch of last year. They played each other last year in the Alamo Bowl, I think. Yeah. Texas and UW. It's a rematch.
Really? Yeah. But
this is a different Texas team this year.
Well, I agree. Yeah. It's gonna be interesting.
Yeah. So I don't think the NCAA wants to see Brock Glenn, a third string quarterback for Florida State. You know, they want the best for maybe the hottest hand, so to speak. The best matchups available, and these may be the best matchups available.
What's your take on it, Brad? I know you got something to say about Texas and UW. What's your take on that? Because you obviously think something about Texas.
Well, being born in Bama and growing up in Texas, I'm kind of biased both ways. And when I found out that Texas was going to, hold on, my phone's freaking out.
We can still see you.
Okay, good. When I found out Texas was going to the SEC, I was kind of excited. And then I started thinking, well, crap, what am I going to do when they have to play Alabama? I'm constantly going to be rooting against Texas all the time. I can never wish success for them now. First off, I hate the BCS system. Yeah. I hate the CFP system. I think they should have gone to a playoff system a long time ago.
Oh yeah.
I think
we
6,
both agree. Yeah.
Yeah. I think 6 is enough. And I think that it needs to be based on both who deserves it and who's the best. You can't have teams like Florida State, who had one of the hardest schedules in the country. And when I say hardest schedules in the country, they were, I think, 4 in strength of schedule. And go undefeated. Do what?
I think they were. I'm not sure, but you're right. They did.
Yeah, they were up there. Schedule. Yeah, top 10 for sure.
Yeah, and they go undefeated, and just because their starting quarterback gets hurt, you leave them out. Yeah, their quarterback only had 55 yards passing, but their defense played lights out.
Yeah,
and if the other team can't score, they can win a national title.
Yeah.
So there's no doubt they deserve to be there. Now, the justification that the CFP used is that they're not the best team. Well, yeah, they may not be the best team, but they're one of the best teams in the country, and they deserve to be there. You can make the same argument for Georgia. Washington, I'm so fed up about hearing how good the Pac-12 is, because every year they show up and they get showed up. Every time. They don't play defense.
Quite a while, several years, I think. This is the first year in the CFP in a while.
Yeah, but every time they show up, they get beat in the first round, and it's because they don't play defense. They don't, and that's why that's exactly why Oregon and Washington are leaving.
Well, they're not going to beat Texas, but they'll give them trouble, I
think. I don't see it. I think Sarkisian has had these kids long in the season. This is another thing that people don't understand. Everybody hates on Alabama because of how dominant Alabama's been. Alabama's done more than just become the dominant Alabama that everybody hates. Alabama has improved the SEC as a whole, because when Alabama started getting good, everybody wanted to come to Bama, so they started getting all the recruits. Well, then there were so many people going to Bama that the good recruits couldn't all go there. So they started going to Georgia and LSU and Ole Miss, and the SEC got better, and the SEC got more and more better and kept getting better. And then it became the premier conference in the country. Well, it's been the premier conference in the country for 10 good years. And there isn't another conference out there that can compete. That's why Oklahoma and Texas are leaving and coming to the SEC. That's why the Big Ten only has Ohio State and Michigan.
I mean, I think, well, I mostly agree with you. The SEC is dominant. There's no doubt about that. Even though I'm a Big Ten guy, they are dominant. But I do think, and you probably will disagree with me, but I do think, besides Alabama and Georgia, I do think SEC is not. They are still really good, but I don't think they are as dominant. Their out of conference record shows that, and
well, it's starting to hurt them now.
And
I think NIL has a little bit to do with it now.
Other teams are kind of catching up. Like even Alabama and Georgia weren't as dominant this year. They're still really good. Don't get me wrong. They're the cream of the crop of the country. They're the two best teams in the SEC by far. But I guess what I'm saying is I do think like other ranked teams could beat some of the other ranked teams in SEC besides Alabama and Georgia. I think like I think like Ohio State can beat Ole Miss. Ohio State can beat Tennessee. Ohio State can beat LSU. It'll probably be a really good game. And maybe even Penn State can get some games. Their offense sucks, but they have a good defense. Penn State's problem is their offense is garbage, but they have a good defense, though. So they could win some games.
Ohio State would be equivalent to an Ole Miss. Ohio State would be equivalent to, well, this year Ohio State would probably be a little better than LSU.
Middle of the pack, you mean, in the SEC if they were in the SEC? Ole Miss is usually middle of the pack.
Ole Miss only lost 3 games this year.
But usually they're in the middle. Usually. This year they had an excellent year.
Yeah, there's not dominance, what I'm saying.
Yeah, like Alabama I think Ohio State would do well. I don't think they would win the thing, but they would do well.
Right, you're right. Yeah. I didn't mean to cut you off, Monty. No, what I'm saying is Alabama and Georgia are still a cream of the crop, and other teams are ranked, but I think other teams that are ranked are just beatable. Alabama and Georgia are very hard to beat, but but I think like other teams are very beatable. Like other teams out of conference can beat these guys if they play a good game. That's what I'm saying. Like I don't think it's quite what it was like you were alluding to, because like several years ago, like from top to bottom in the SEC, man, like it was like filled, like you said. I mean, they were by far the best conference by far. There's no arguing that. And I'm not even an SEC guy. That's just the truth. But I think other conferences are catching up. I mean, and Big Ten's got some other ranked teams that are kind of like the SEC teams where they're not as good, but they're still pretty good. Like Penn State is still pretty good. Iowa is decent. They have a horrible offense, but they got the defense. They showed that last night.
They're not garbage. It's just they're not as good. You got Wisconsin, Penn State. You got Purdue.
They're bad this year, but they were really good last year. Purdue had a really bad year this year. I don't know what happened to those guys. They fell off the map.
Well, look at what Missouri did this year.
Yeah, Missouri came out of nowhere. You're right. They came out of nowhere.
If they wouldn't have lost early, they'd be in the conversation for this playoff. Yeah.
And they gave Georgia a game.
Impressed me a lot.
Yeah, even the ACC is picking up their game because they constantly end up having to deal with the Big Ten or the SEC.
Right, and they want to compete.
And Brad, this is where I kind of disagree with you a bit. You think 6 is enough? I think 12 is perfect just for this reason. Look at all the teams we're talking about right now. The Missouris, the teams in the ACC. I think it's fitting for a 12-team playoff next year. Yes, like I talked about a couple of days ago, the 13th and 14th team are going to believe that they got screwed, but that's how it goes. I think 12 teams would be perfect. Man, I wish we could do it this year.
Also,
how many Division I conferences are there?
Division I?
Oh my God, there's a lot. But I don't think some of the smaller conferences will have much of a say unless they play really lights out and like are undefeated, and they might get in the top 12. But
correct. Correct. You have the Power 5, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And then you have the smaller conferences.
Someone could squeak in like Cincinnati a couple years ago.
Well, this year would be a team like Liberty. Well, I think they're 20th or something.
They're 20th, yeah.
But I think the top 12 wouldn't be one of those smaller conferences. It would be maybe one of the middle of the pack, Big Ten, SEC.
Well, it could be like
you.
Ohio State, who lost to Michigan
Right.
this year. I mean, they'll
Right.
be in. Florida State
That's
would
what
be
I'm
in, like
saying.
Brad said. You know, those 6 teams would be in.
You take your Power 5 conference champions and then your one Cinderella from the smaller divisions or smaller conferences.
Mm-hmm.
And there's your 6 teams for you win your conference. You have your conference championship in every conference. You win your conference, you go to the playoff. You don't win your conference, you sit your butt at home and watch it on TV.
Okay.
Interesting.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm just glad
Folks
we're
out there watching this. What do you think, man?
Yeah. What do you think, viewers? What's your comments on this? But I like the 12 too, because it eliminates any doubt. Because if you don't get in the top 12, you just don't deserve to get in. You can argue all you want about being 13, but like if you're 13, it means you didn't have the greatest year ever. I mean, for some teams that's really good because they may have not been ranked in a long time, and this is their breakout year. But but for the teams that are always in this thing, like you got to make it to the top 12, like Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, all the teams that always seem to be there neck and neck. Usually Clemson, but Clemson wasn't any good this year, stuff like that. So, but 12 just eliminates it. Like just play the 12 teams, and there might be some upsets. There could be some blowouts, 12 playing 1, all that good stuff. But it is what it is. So, but I like the 12 system format or 12 game format or 12 team format, I would say. Let's get into some of the games that we saw before we run out of time. I guess I'll take the UW Oregon game. I watched that whole entire game. Me and Monty, Brad, if you didn't watch our last show, we talked about how we thought Oregon was going to blow these guys out, and it didn't happen. Michael Penix showed up to play, and it being another nail-biter game like it has been the past 3 games. And every single game, UW has won by 3 points in the past 3 meetings. And it's almost exactly the same scores. Like 2 years ago was 36-33. I think earlier this year it was something like that. And then, on Friday night it was 34-31. They've been like in the low to like the mid-30s range. And UW always seems to win with like either a game-winning field goal. They always seem to score last right at the end, and they're always able to hold off Oregon at the very end. It's kind of been a format the past 3 meetings. But I thought Oregon was going to get the brakes beat off of them because me and Monty were alluding to Oregon's playing a lot better football the past 5 or 6 weeks of the season. They're beating the crap out of everyone, and UW is barely surviving against mediocre teams in the Pac-12 like Stanford and Arizona State, who have nothing this year. Like they're the bottom feeders in the Pac-12, and they were just barely beating those guys like by a touchdown. So that's what got me like a little bit worried about UW. Like what is going on with these guys? Because Penix seemed like he was falling like a little bit off the map, like me and Monty were saying. Like he was still playing good, but his stats weren't quite as good when he was up for. Well, he's still up for the Heisman. He might actually win the Heisman now because he beat Oregon. So, what's your take on that, guys? And do you guys think Penix is going to win the Heisman? Because he might, because he just pulled off this upset. I won't say an upset, but he did beat Oregon. Because I thought it was going down to Bo Nix or Penix. I mean, Daniels is good, but the problem with Daniels is LSU's defense. They lost 3 games. That's why I think Daniels may not get it. But stat-wise, Daniels is probably the best guy. Stats. So, what do you guys think?
I had Bo Nix as the front runner, as we talked about last week. But no, I think now that Penix beat him in front of everybody, national television, soundly, I might add, that might give him the edge. I don't know how these voters think. I might be way off, but man, he may have taken the lead with that performance.
What do you think, Brad?
Yeah, I haven't paid enough attention to Washington to see him play. I saw bits and pieces of the Washington Oregon game.
Yeah,
but I wasn't really watching. I was more watching Bo Nix than anything else because obviously Bo Nix came from Auburn. So now that he's not playing for Auburn, I can root for him because Roll Tide. So I used to despise that kid when he was at Auburn.
Yeah, I don't blame him.
But yeah, I mean, he looks good. I know that there's been a big push for Jalen Milroe to get into the Heisman talk, but I honestly don't think Jalen Milroe is ready for the Heisman talk yet. I think next year, if he keeps progressing the way he did this year, I think he will be light years above anybody else that'll be in the field. But I think it would be a shame for Jaden Daniels to lose the Heisman just because of LSU's defense.
Yeah, that's
I don't.
Okay. Okay.
I don't.
Yeah.
You know, if they're going to give it to the best player, don't screw him over because of his team.
Okay. Makes sense.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
But you also got to look at, if he's the best player, how does he affect his team? And I know he doesn't play defense, but if he can't get his team into the college football playoff by pulling out last second wins that keep him undefeated, does he really deserve it?
Right.
Because that's a Heisman moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
Getting your team into field goal position so you can kick that last minute field goal to stay undefeated.
Yeah.
That's a Heisman moment.
Yeah.
Good job. Yeah. I agree.
I agree. Well, let's talk about your team, Brad. Alabama, Georgia. I'll let you cover that game. I'm sure you watched that from start to finish. I watched most of the second half. I missed the first half. I was out walking the dogs. It was sunny here in Washington, which is rare, so I had to get the dogs out of the house with my wife. So I missed most of the first half. I saw all the second. I knew it was a close game, and but Alabama to me looked like they were in control of the second half. Georgia kept on making it close, but Alabama always had to lead the entire second half, and they didn't give it. They never gave up the lead from what I saw in the second half. What's your take on that, Brad? Since you're a big Crimson Tide guy.
Well, so let me start off by saying that after the Iron Bowl, I was already 100% completely out of whiskey. So I had to rely on blood pressure meds and hope. Honestly, something people don't realize is when you watch Alabama play Georgia, it's like watching the same team play against itself. It's different players and different talent sets every year, but Kirby Smart and Nick Saban were together for so long and built the Alabama program into what it is. They're the same team. Alabama didn't win and Georgia didn't lose. Georgia just ran out of time.
Yeah.
If there would have been another minute on the clock and the clock would have then stopped, it probably would have been a different outcome. If you had stopped the clock a couple minutes earlier, it would have been a different outcome.
Yeah.
This is just one of those years where those teams are so close in skill level that it's all based on when the game stops. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier about not liking the CFP. If they really wanted the four best teams, Georgia would be in the playoffs. I didn't think Alabama was going to get put in. I thought it was going to be Florida State and Georgia. And when all the talk after all the games were over and people talking about Bama going in, I'm like, that'd be really nasty if they did Florida State like that. But I kind of understood it with the third string quarterback. But I'm glad Bama won. And I'm glad they won.
Yeah.
There is some criteria. My neighbor Rick, who Monty met when he came out here to visit me in Washington earlier this summer, there is criteria in their playoffs thing that, what they're doing at their committee. Like if key players are hurt, it could take them out of the top four. And I think that was their reasoning for taking Florida State out, even though they went undefeated.
Yeah, exactly. And they don't consider strength of schedule, which is insane.
Yeah.
Because if you don't consider strength of schedule, then why would anybody want to schedule hard teams?
That's what Urban Meyer said exactly last night after the Michigan game. He said exactly that. He's like, he said, he made a comment about that. Like if they screw people over, they're like, we're gonna play cupcakes all the time.
Yeah, he was talking about the Texas Alabama game earlier in the year. He said,
that's what he was.
If they don't put Texas in and they let Alabama go, he goes, if I were Sark, I would never schedule.
That's exactly what he said. That's exactly what he said.
Yeah.
That's the reason why they're both in that matchup right there.
Right. And me and Monty were talking about that earlier on our phone call before we started the show. Like the reason we mentioned, like, Texas had to be in because they put Alabama and they had to put Texas. I mean, they just had to. If not,
well,
a freaking complete chaos.
Well, it was already complete chaos, but
It
you
would
could
have gotten
make the
worse.
argument. Yeah, you could make the argument for Texas being left out because Florida State was undefeated.
Yeah.
And you could make the argument for Texas being left out because Georgia, when Michigan beat OSU, OSU only dropped 4 points, or
Yeah.
4 spots.
Yeah.
When Georgia lost to number 8, when Georgia lost to number 8, they would only drop 4 points.
Yeah.
Right. And they went all the way down
So,
to 6. Yeah.
So that would put Georgia in the number 4 slot. That would move Alabama up into number 3, leaving Texas at 5.
Right.
Now, everybody wants to talk about the head-to-head because the CFP makes such a big deal about the head-to-head. Well, Texas didn't beat the number 1 team in the country. Alabama did. So the head-to-head is nullified by beating the number 1 team in the country in the conference championship.
Yeah, that's good.
So there you don't need that tiebreaker for the head-to-head.
That's true. Yeah.
That's a good point.
Right.
They backed themselves into a corner that was going to be ugly no matter how you cut it, and Florida State was just the victim of it.
Yes, exactly. Everyone's been saying that. I think it's one thing everyone agrees on. Like that's why they had to make this change next year, which has been long overdue. Like we've been saying, because it did back them in a hole. I'll talk about Michigan Iowa real quick since we got a little over 3 minutes, and we'll go into the semifinals. Michigan beat Iowa 26-0, but I hated the way Michigan played. I knew Iowa had a really good defense. So I knew it was going to be a struggle at times. Michigan has good athletes on the field, but they just seemed off. I don't know if that's because Harbaugh is back and everyone's been crying about Harbaugh, free Harbaugh, and they were like so motivated when Harbaugh was gone. Then he comes back to the sideline, and I just don't know if they didn't quite play as good. They just looked a little bit flat. I mean, give credit to Iowa's defense; they're good, but there was multiple plays where Michigan's tight end Loveland's really good. He misses a wide open pass at the end of the first half. They're already up 10-0, but they could have been up by more. He missed a 25-yard dime that McCarthy threw him. He just dropped it. It would have got them at least in the field goal range, or maybe even scoring a touchdown before the end of the half to make it 13-0 or 17-0. The game would have been over. But it was still a game in the second half because Michigan just really struggled in the second quarter. They started off really good in the first quarter, getting the opening field goal. Their punt return ran all the way back down to the 5-yard line. Blake Corum got his first touchdown in the game, make it 10-0. Then the second quarter, they just really, I thought the wheels fell off. But the good news about Michigan is their defense was lights out, just like Iowa's. The only difference was Michigan was getting turnovers and Iowa wasn't. Michigan was getting turnovers, and Michigan's offense was getting the ball in the red zone for easy touchdowns or field goals to win the game. So to me, that was the difference. Was Michigan's offense had their worst game of the year. In my opinion, their defense saved them. So Michigan does have a good defense. Now, be interesting with the Alabama-Michigan matchup with defenses and skilled players and all that good stuff. So Michigan survived, but I did not like the way they played. I just take it as, hey, it's one ugly win, but sometimes you got to win an ugly game, and they survived. They did what they had to do to get themselves in. So, but I didn't like the way they played from offensive standpoint. I was like going nuts. I don't know how you are, Brad, watching Alabama games, but I was just like, I was pissed. I was texting my dad saying Michigan's sucking, man. So I was like, they're not playing good at all. I'm just like on the edge of my seat, saying they better not lose this game because I was gonna be really upset. So but Michigan wasn't gonna lose to Iowa. It's just a matter of how much they were gonna win by, I guess you can say. But anyway,
man,
we're under a minute, but
man, this could have been an hour show, man.
yeah, unfortunately, we only have 40 minutes, and we don't get the full 40 because we had to do our pregame stuff. But anyways, real quick, less than a minute. Obviously, Brad, do you think Michigan Alabama is going to be a good game? I think it will be. I know you obviously got Alabama winning, but I got Michigan winning, of course, obviously, but it's going to be really good. But I do know Michigan's going to be the underdog. They're the number one team because of their bowl game history with Harbaugh is horrible, and Alabama's Alabama. You guys have ruled this decade, like you mentioned. So I know Alabama is going to be the favorite, even though Michigan is number one, if that makes sense. So
I don't think Bama will be the favorite. I think Michigan will be.